Welcome to the Crystal Coven Mystic Monday, where things are never the mundane, the podcast where we sit for a spell and talk about things that are more than the ordinary. We'll discuss witchy topics, herbalism, crystals, spiritual practices, and everything in between. So grab your broom, stir the cauldron, and let's create magic with a K.
Hello, my beautiful souls, and welcome back to another episode of Mystic Mondays from the hearth of the Crystal Coven Mystic Cottage. I'm your host, Shannon, and I'm so thankful that you have joined me for another conversation. In this episode, I want to begin with a question that has stayed with me for quite a while. Someone asked me recently, do you believe that Appalachian folk magic still exists? I did not have to think about that very long before I answered, and I said yes, but only as long as we keep it alive. But then I added something that even surprised me, the fact that it's fading. Not because the mountains have been forgotten, not because the herbs have lost their healing, not because old prayers have stopped working. It's fading because fewer people are carrying it forward. That question has lingered with me and on my mind since. The more that I've thought about it, the more that I've realized that maybe we are asking the wrong question. Perhaps we should be asking, who is still remembering? Because folk magic has never lived inside of books. It's never depended upon famous practitioners. It's never belonged to museums or universities. It has always lived in people. It lived in grandmothers who knew which herbs together before sunrise. It lived in neighbors who quietly shared remedies without expecting recognition. It lived in women who swept their porches each morning with purpose, blessed their gardens before planting, whispered prayers over bread dough, and tucked a bit of wisdom into ordinary conversation. It lived in fathers who watched the weather by reading the skies instead of the apps. It lived in families who knew the stories behind certain trees, springs, and hollers. And most importantly, it lived because someone took the time to teach someone else. That's the heartbeat of folk magic. It is not preserved because it isn't written down. It's preserved because it's practiced. And that's what I want to talk about. Not just Appalachian folk magic itself, but why traditions like these survive at all. Why, after hundreds of years, people still bless their homes, why they still hang herbs from the rafters, why they still plant by the moon, why they still light candles during difficult times, why they still carry lucky charms or tuck protective items above the doorway, why these practices continue even in the world with technology, artificial intelligence, smartphones, and instant answers. I think the answer is simple, because people still need hope. People still need belonging. People still need rituals that remind them that they are not powerless. And perhaps, now more than ever, people are longing for reconnection with something that feels genuine, rooted, and deeply human. As we move through this episode, I want to explore not only why folk magic has endured for generations, but also why I believe preserving Appalachian tradition matters. Not because we should romanticize the past, not because every old custom needs to be revived exactly as it was, but because within those traditions is something worth protecting. They remind us that the sacred was not found only in grand rituals or expensive tools. Sometimes it is found in the way that our grandmothers stirred a pot of beans. Sometimes it's found in opening the window on the first warm day of spring. Sometimes it's found in blessing a loaf of bread before sharing it with the family. Sometimes it's found in the quiet saying of a prayer while sweeping the front porch. These aren't just habits. These are expressions of care. These are expressions of hope. These remind us that ordinary life itself can be sacred, and if we stop practicing them, if we stop telling the stories, if we stop teaching the next generation, then folk magic doesn't disappear because someone outlawed it. It disappears because no one remembered to pass it on. That, to me, is one of the greatest threats facing Appalachian folk tradition today. Not the skepticism, not modern life, not forgetfulness. So in this episode, let's spend some time just remembering. Let's talk about why folk magic endures, why some parts of it are fading, and what each of us can do to keep these beautiful traditions alive, not as relics of the past, but as living practices that continue to bring meaning, comfort, and connection into our everyday lives. Now, before we go any further, let's define what we mean by folk magic. Folk magic is not one religion. It is not one tradition. It is not owned by one culture. Folk magic is simply the practical spiritual traditions created by ordinary people. It grows naturally wherever people live. Farmers developed it, midwives carried it, grandmothers preserved it, travelers adopted it, neighbors shared it, and it was not usually written down. It was remembered. Passed down from hand to hand, generation to generation. It was not practiced to become powerful. It was practiced because life was uncertain. Crops failed, children became sick, storms destroyed homes, loved ones left for war, money ran short, winters grew harsh. People did not always have medicine. They didn't always have doctors available. But what they did have was hope, and folk magic gave shape to that hope. One of the things that I love most about folk magic is that it is not separate from everyday life. The kitchen became a temple, laundry became purification, gardening became prayer, bread became blessing, cleaning became protection, sewing became intention, walking became pilgrimage. Everything ordinary became sacred. That's a remarkable way to live. Instead of dividing life into spiritual and non-spiritual, folk traditions remind us that sacred can be found in absolutely everything. Sweeping the floor was not only cleaning, it was removing stagnant energy. Opening windows was not just for fresh air, it was welcoming blessings. Shared food was not merely hospitality, it strengthened community. And lighting a candle wasn't about decoration, it became hope made visible. So why is it important that folk magic does not disappear? Because it answers the needs that have not disappeared. Human beings still long for safety, meaning, comfort, healing, connection, hope, and control during uncertain times. These needs haven't changed over thousands of years. Only the scenery has changed. Instead of worrying about wolves outside the village, we worry about bills. Instead of surviving harsh winters, we survive burnout. Instead of failed harvest, we fear losing jobs. Different problems, same emotion. And folk magic will still speak directly to these emotions if we allow it. Now, modern life often makes us passive. We scroll, we wait, we consume, we react. But folk magic asks something entirely different. It asks us to participate. Instead of wishing for luck, tie a ribbon. Instead of looking for hope, plant something. Instead of fearing tomorrow, light a candle. Instead of feeling hopeless, bless your home. The action itself becomes meaningful. Even before we discuss spiritual beliefs, something changes psychologically. We become participants of our own lives, and that's what matters. Now, folk magic creates rituals, and believe it or not, human beings need ritual, whether we realize it or not. Morning coffee becomes ritual. Sunday dinners become a ritual. Birthday candles become ritual. Graduation ceremonies become ritual. Funerals become rituals. Wedding rings become rituals. We already live ritual lives. Folk magic simply adds conscious intention. Instead of automatically making tea, we prepare tea for healing. Instead of sweeping, we intentionally remove stagnant energy. Instead of watering plants, we give gratitude. And it is this physical action that becomes an anchor for both the mind and the spirit. One thing you'll notice across nearly every culture is that the keepers of folk wisdom were often elder women. Not always, but very often. Grandmothers remembered things books never recorded, which herbs soothed fevers, which prayers were spoken during storms, which moon favored planting beans, how to comfort a grieving neighbor, how to stretch food through a winter, how to bless a newborn, how to quietly protect a home. This was not mystical because they wanted to seem mysterious. This was practical knowledge accumulated through generations, experiences becoming tradition, tradition becoming wisdom, and wisdom becoming folklore. Folk magic does change with time, and one reason is because it adapts. It never stays frozen. An Appalachian granny might place a Bible verse above a doorway. Another practitioner might hang rosemary. Someone else hangs protective symbols. Different methods, same intention. The heart remains. Only the expression will change, and that's resilience. Folk traditions have always borrowed, adapted, evolved. That's why they continue to live instead of becoming museum exhibits. Now let's talk honestly just for a moment. Even people who do not consider themselves spiritual often develop little rituals. Athletes wear lucky socks. Students use the same pen for every exam. Travelers kiss charms before flying. Parents save their babies' first shoes. People make wishes when blowing out birthday candles. Why? Because rituals help us emotionally organize uncertainty. Hope is powerful, not because it guarantees outcome, because it changes how we meet them. When people perform meaningful rituals, they often experience greater calm, confidence, and resilience. Whether someone sees that as psychology, spirituality, or both, the ritual itself can become a steady force during uncertain times. Another reason why it's important for folk magic to survive is because it creates belonging. Community has always been magical, not because everyone believed exactly the same thing, because they participated together. Some of the strongest folk traditions were not individually practiced, they were community practiced. Harvest festivals, barn raisings, quilting circles, communal meals, blessings before planting. These rituals reminded people that they were not alone. One thing that folk tradition never forgot is that humans belong to nature. The moon still changes, birds still migrate, trees still bloom, seasons still turn, rain still nourishes, the wind still carries seeds. Nature never stopped speaking. Many of us simply stopped listening. But it is folk magic that invites us back. Not to escape the modern world, but to remember we are part of something older than it. When you notice the first fireflies of summer, the scent of fresh rain, or the changing colors of autumn, you're reconnecting with the rhythms that humans have observed for generations. Every family has traditions. Some are spiritual and some are not, but they are all powerful. A grandmother would bake cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. A dad would whistle while gardening. A mom would open a window the first warm day of spring. An aunt always tucked lavender into the dresser drawer. A grandmother never started a journey without saying a certain blessing. These became emotional anchors. Eventually, they became family folklore. That is how folk magic survives, one memory at a time. One misconception about magic is that it requires expensive supplies. Folk traditions say otherwise. A candle, a bowl of water, a loaf of bread, a handful of herbs, a spoken blessing, a clean home, a thankful heart. These always have been enough, and in many ways, folk magic reminds us that intention often matters more than extravagance. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you already know my heart leans deeply toward the Appalachian folk traditions, not because they're exotic, not because they're trendy, but because they feel honest. They were born from people who lived close to the land, cared for their neighbors, made do with what they had, and carried wisdom through stories, habits, and quiet acts of care. That kind of wisdom doesn't demand attention. It earns trust over time. And for me, that's one reason why folk magic needs to endure. It reminds us that the sacred is not reserved for special places or extraordinary people. It can be found in the way that we tend to a garden, stir a pot of soup, sweep a porch, comfort a friend, or light a candle with intention. Now, if you're wondering how to begin or deepen your own relationship with folk magic, start small. You do not need a perfect altar or a shelf full of supplies. Try weaving intention to what you're already doing. Light a candle before you begin your day and set a clear intention. Sweep your front porch or kitchen floor while imagining you're clearing away worry and welcoming peace. Keep a simple bowl of seasonal herbs, flowers, or fruit on your table as a reminder of nature's abundance. Bless the meal that you're about to eat with gratitude, no matter how simple it is. Step outside for a few minutes each day and notice what the season is telling you. These are not complicated practices, but over time, they will help you cultivate awareness, gratitude, and most importantly, presence. Now, with one final stir of the cauldron, I would like to leave you with this thought. Perhaps folk magic has endured for thousands of years because it reminds us of something that we have always needed to remember, that ordinary life is worthy of reverence, that small acts matter, that hope deserves expression, that wisdom can be carried in stories as much as in books, that the hands that tend gardens, comfort children, and care for their neighbors are capable of creating something sacred. Whether you call it magic, tradition, faith, mindfulness, or simply the way of paying attention, the invitation is still the same. To live with intention, to honor the season, to care for one another, and to remember that some of the oldest forms of wisdom did not survive because they were loud. They survived because they were lived. Until next time, may your home be filled with peace, your hands be guided by wisdom, your heart remain open to wonder, and may you always remember that some of the strongest magic in the world isn't found in grand displays. It is found in the quiet rituals that help us care for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Blessed be.
Thank you for joining us in the sacred space of Mystic Mondays. May the insights shared today illuminate your path and bring harmony to your soul. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and connect with us at the Crystal Coven Mystic Cottage. You can find us on several social media platforms as well as Patreon, where the magic never ends. Just look for the Crystal Coven and Salem the Shop Cat in the logo, or check out the show notes for more information. Until next time, stay mystical, stay magical, and trust in the universe. Blessed be.